Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on this Sunday morning. I'd like to start by acknowledging and thanking the Youth Association for Academics, Athletics, and Charter and Character Education for hosting this announcement. It's my pleasure to be here with my parliamentary colleagues. As a mother and advocate for mental health supports, I know how important mental health is for student success, both in the classroom and in life. Just 2 days ago, our government announced its core education funding for the 2024-25 school year. I'm proud to say we've increased mental health funding to over $117 million, a 577% increase since 2017-2018. Not only are we increasing mental health funding in the next school year, but last year we also passed the Better Schools and Student Outcomes Act. This provides the Minister of Education with authority to issue policies and guidelines on student mental health. I'm incredibly proud of this government for mandating mental health learning in the curriculum that was put in place this school year, as well as increasing student mental health and addiction prevention supports. We know there is more to do. Students today are facing real challenges when it comes to mental health, especially online. We've heard from the experts that excessive cell phone and mobile device use has a negative impact on student mental health and well-being. A study from the Centre for Addictions and Mental Health revealed that over a third of Ontario high school students, are spending 5 hours or more daily on devices, whether they are scrolling social media, gaming, or on their laptops. 1 in 5 students have reported symptoms of moderate to serious problems, including preoccupation, loss of control, withdrawal, and relationship issues with friends and families. Evidence shows that too much time using cell phone can lead to depression and anxiety, and it puts children and youth at risk of abuse, cyberbullying, and invasion of privacy. Students deserve a school environment safe from distraction and peer pressures, where they can get back to basics and focus on learning. Minister Lecce and the government started consulting with students, parents, staff, and health experts over the past few years, from Sick Kids to CAMH to CMHO, and student trustees and leaders, parent associations, and school staff and administration across the board. We have listened attentively, and today we are acting. I will now pass the mic to my friend and colleague, Parliamentary Assistant Billy Pang, to share a few words. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Natalie, for highlighting what we are doing to increase mental health support for Ontario students. It's a pleasure to be here with you for today's announcement. Before I was elected by the people of Markham-Unionville to serve as their MPP, I represented parents and students in Markham Region as a York Region District School Board trustee. As an elected trustee, I listened to the concerns of parents, and they made it clear that our schools need to do a better job of preparing young people for the post-secondary education and the workforce. As a father, I know how important it is to give our students the very best education system and to prepare them for a brighter future. We want children to learn in positive, healthy, safe, and engaging learning environments that focus on what matters most. Important lifelong skills like reading, writing, and math. Now, as an MPP and parliamentary assistant to the Minister of Education, I hear from educators, parents, and students about how disruption in the classroom are impacting learning. Our caucus has led the way with local discussions with parents, teachers, principals, health experts, and students. And the message is clear. We need to act with urgency and strength to protect students and change the culture in schools for the better. This is why the changes Minister Lecce will be announcing today and are so important. They will help improve learning in the classroom, keep kids focused, and promote better mental health and well-being. Now, please join me as I welcome the Honourable Stephen Lecce, Ontario's Minister of Education, to share Ontario's plan to get kids focused in class and back to basic in improving fundamental reading, writing, and math skills. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much to the amazing parliamentary assistants, Billy Pang and Natalie Pierre. Thank you for being with us. A special thanks to the Youth Association for Academics, Athletics, and Character Education, to our student trustee-elect, Hayden Lai, our colleagues from CAMH, the Heart and Stroke, and numerous experts and leaders and parents with us today, all of whom are making a difference in supporting student mental and physical health. I want to just take a moment to thank my amazing colleagues who have been with us on this journey for reform since day one. MPPs Lauren Coe, Dawn Gallagher-Murphy, Daisy Way, Natalia Kusendova, Laura Smith, Patrice Barnes. We also have with us today Christine Hogarth, Sharif Sabawi, and a special recognition to the individual who worked so hard to champion this cause, my friend and colleague Jess Dixon, who brought forth a motion in the legislature that received all-party support. In this government, our mission has been to keep kids in stable classrooms. It has been about stability in the life and the routine of a child. It is the first step by which we get back to the basics in this province. And it helps to protect the mental and physical health of every child. It's why, for the first time in nearly a generation, our government signed deals with all Ontario teacher unions that averts province-wide strikes. We've delivered 3 more years of uninterrupted learning with their friends and their teachers, which we know is so critical for their mental and physical health. However, that alone will not restore the academic focus and rigor and safety back into Ontario classrooms. You know, every parent and teacher we speak to has shared the growing problem of cell phone distractions in class during instructional time, in addition to the disturbing rise of vaping in schools amongst our youth. Students acknowledge this reality too. We need to be bold, we need to be comprehensive, and we need to act with urgency today as we restore focus and safety and common sense back into our school system. And it's why we are proud and pleased to unveil Ontario's comprehensive plan that includes some of the strongest measures in this country when it comes to restricting cell phone use and banning vaping in our schools. With over 85% of Ontarians confirming that they support action to curb the use of cell phones when in class, there is a growing consensus that our policy must first and foremost be focused on prevention through education to change the hearts and minds of our kids. At its core, this is an educational overhaul for the student, the teacher, and even the parent. However, our policy includes enforcement to ensure compliance and consistency province-wide. Through these changes that will be coming into effect this fall, we will be denying cell phone use during instructional time. For our youngest learners in kindergarten to grade 6 who may have phones, they will now be required to keep phones on silent and out of sight for the duration of the day. They, of course, can be permitted to use phones at lunch, for example. However, they must receive explicit consent from their teacher or the school staff. Now, for our older kids in grade 7 and up, they will be required to turn off their mobile devices or set them on silent mode, keep them out of sight when they're in the classroom. And if they do not comply, they will be asked to surrender their phones or they could be sent to the office. Our policy on cell phones is quite simple. The default this September, unless explicitly directed by their educator, for a child is out of sight, out of mind when it comes to cell phones in Ontario. The province is also requiring all publicly funded school boards to restrict access to social media on school networks and school devices so that schools are places of learning and the development of social and emotional and communication skills. And now we have to keep parents informed on their child's focus in class, and that's why, to do so, we're committing to having report cards include comments on their students' distraction levels in class too. Now, this September, we're also going to be banning vape devices from schools and school-related settings, along with cannabis and nicotine and tobacco products. We heard it from the parliamentary assistants. A 2022 study confirms 40% of Ontario vapers are under the age of 25, and most of them vape for curiosity, enjoyment, and stress relief. I think we could all agree this is deeply concerning. It is unacceptable. So under this new policy, students found possessing vapes, as well as cannabis and tobacco and nicotine, will be asked to surrender them, and schools will now be required to immediately notify their parents. This policy was largely developed, if you could believe it, following the advice of students. I remember 2 years ago meeting with student trustees in Windsor and Essex, and when we spoke with them, they recommended this path forth to change the culture in schools. In addition, we're explicitly banning vapes in schools. We're also investing $30 million, which we're formally announcing today, over 3 years to have vape detectors installed in school washrooms and other spaces. At the end of the day, we're talking about behavioral and addiction issues in many cases. We need to approach these issues with compassion and a commitment to help students seek treatment for those that may need it. It's why our government is also announcing a new investment of $17.5 million for the coming school year to support mental health and well-being. And these supports will help connect students and families to enhance community health and addiction services. It's a recognition that we must not only educate and enforce the policy, but enhance the wraparound supports to help our kids, be it for those who depend on phones or on vapes. It's also a recognition that so much bullying and cyberbullying is taking place in our schools, often compounded by the use of cell phones in class. So these changes and new supports are designed to counter these threats. Finally, we also know teachers and principals and school staff play a critical role, and I want to acknowledge the difficulty they have day in and day out to keep kids focused. So that's why we're going to be using a PA Day to institute mandatory professional development to train and support our education staff. We will place clear, standardized bilingual signage in every school outlining these new rules. We're also announcing funding for parent involvement committees to launch localized campaigns in the schools engaging parents, while also launching a provincial digital ad campaign to communicate to parents and a separate campaign to students about these changes and the role they play. Tomorrow, our government will be sending parents a letter that will outline our plan to empower parents to start to hold those conversations about these serious changes. Because the success of this policy hinges on you, on Ontario parents speaking to their children, working with our educators and our school boards, conditioning them to this new reality. So, of course, we need parents to be on side to help to enforce these rules, and I will back our principals and our teachers who enforce this policy each and every time. Ultimately, the changes we are announcing today to the Provincial Code of Conduct is to ensure we have one uniform provincial policy. It is my hope, it is our expectation that students will respect the staff and their professional judgment on when cell phones and technology can be used in class for educational purposes. As Minister of Education, and on behalf of our Premier, we remain committed to ensuring that all Ontario students are set up for success. And I will continue to drive forward with this amazing team the Back to Basics agenda, where students learn to respect others, to communicate using social emotional skills with their friends, where academic focus is back along with common sense in our schools. Now, change will come with all of us working together, standing by our teachers and principals and education workers as they implement these new measures. And most of all, let us as a society think soberly about the generational impact this policy can have if we work together for the health of our children. Thank you, and merci. And now like to turn and welcome to Brady Carbo-Hamilton, the Senior Vice President of the Heart and Stroke Foundation of Canada, and welcome Brady to the podium. Thank you so much.
On behalf of Heart and Stroke in Ontario, it is an honour to stand here today in support of the new vape measures outlined by the government. We are grateful to have worked with and continue to work in close collaboration with the Government of Ontario to promote health, save lives, and enhance recovery. And we are grateful for the leadership shown today and applaud the government's commitment to address youth vaping among Ontario students. Nicotine has no place in our schools. It puts young people at risk of having stunted brain development and negative health outcomes. The long-term health effects of vaping are currently unknown and will not be fully understood for decades. However, at present, we do know there are many health harms associated with vaping. Nicotine alters adolescent brain development and can affect memory and concentration. Vaping has been linked to poor mental health outcomes, including worsening symptoms of depression and anxiety, and vaping liquid contains several chemicals with known toxicity, which can negatively impact the cells in the mouth, nose, lungs, heart, and blood vessels. As you know, vaping rates have skyrocketed over the past decade, and new nicotine products like oral pouches are becoming popular among young people. Despite a slight decline in youth vaping rates during the pandemic, the prevalence of vaping among young people in Ontario has once again increased. The latest surveillance indicates that 15.3% of Ontario students in grades 7 to 12 report current vaping. And particularly concerning and problematic is the data that rates among grades 7 to 9 students have increased in recent years. This is a worrisome trend that is unique to Ontario. To address this public health issue effectively, we need a holistic and multi-pronged strategy. We applaud the Ministry of Education for doing their part in creating nicotine-free school communities, and we are thankful that the Government of Ontario has tackled access with a vape tax, making these products harder to buy for price-sensitive young people. Within today's announcements, we are encouraged to see a comprehensive approach to nicotine control with prevention and enforcement measures, as well as more cessation and mental health supports for students struggling with addiction. Heart and Stroke looks forward to the continued collaboration with the government and upstream measures to further address this public health crisis. I'd now like to welcome Dr. Peter Selby, Senior Scientist and Head of CAMH Nicotine Dependence Clinic, to the podium.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Avril. Thank you and congratulations to Minister Lecce and the government for bringing this in. On behalf of CAMH, we are really pleased to see that we are paying attention to young people's mental health. Most mental health and addiction disorders actually start in youth and young and adolescents. And given that that can affect the future of the people's lives, starting with prevention is so important. Whether you're dealing with people's mental health or their use of substances, and especially when we are looking at nicotine in young people, although we may know that e-cigarettes and other kinds of products are helpful for maybe older smokers who are unable to quit, young people should really be protected because now they're getting into a situation where they cannot pay attention in class, they cannot pay attention to their daily activities, and they're spending money because they're addicted. So we are really pleased at CAMH to have worked with the ministry as well as creating preventive resources, but also creating things like the youth mental health hubs across the province. There are about 38 now, and that can go from ages 12 to 25, so that can really support young people who are already struggling with mental health and addictive disorders. And then at CAMH itself, we have programs for young people who are already suffering from mental illness, but we also have starting programs to help people who are addicted to vaping, because when they vape and they're addicted to it, they're also using things like cannabis, they're also having depression, anxiety, and other issues. And we are very concerned that if we don't help them young, they could land up dropping out of school, dropping out of the workforce, and then not being able to live the full and whole lives with their families, with their friends, and contribute to society. So on behalf of all of us, we are really pleased to see this welcome information coming out and this being declared that schools would become a safer place for people to learn. And if they need help to quit, we can support the teachers, we can support the students and the families. So with that, I'd like to introduce our next speaker for this morning, Hayden Lee, who is the student trustee-elect, York Region District School Board, to the podium. Hayden. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Hayden, and I'm an incoming student trustee with the York Region District School Board.
As a student, I see every day the distractions created by cell phones in the classroom. We are using our phones all the time in class, lunch, breaks, after school. And I know that cell phone usage can sometimes lead to cyberbullying, and all of this is taking away from important class learning, especially in high school when we are preparing to go start careers or preparing to move to college. I also see vaping being very prevalent in our schools and in our washrooms. It's becoming a very common occurrence. That is why today I'm very pleased that Minister Lecce and the government are going to work with us and educators and taking the necessary steps to ensure that students can focus on learning when in class. This policy, with the additional mental health supports, will help students with addiction prevention and ultimately help us to pay more attention in class and focus on their learning. Thank you.
Open the floor for questions. If I can please ask the media to line up behind me if you'd like to ask a question. Please come to the mic and state your name and outlet. And just a reminder, it's one question and one follow-up. First question.
Good morning. My name is Tess Ha from CBC News. What are the major differences between this new bill that you're introducing and the 2019 cell phone ban and 2017 smoking ban? What has more teeth to it?
Absolutely. In 2019, the ministry required school boards to develop a policy. Some boards developed strong policies, and many developed policies that have led us to the place we're at today, where we have high rates of vaping and high rates of cell phone distractions. The fundamental difference is this is the policy the province is implementing with standards, with consistency in the application, in the enforcement, and the educational component. This time we're going to be updating the curriculum to include mandatory learning for young children earlier on the perils of vaping and on responsible use of technology, particularly concepts like digital citizenship. So it's about education, it's about communication, it's about mental health supports coupled with the addiction element. It's also about enforcement with a clear policy that we need kids through an ongoing effort of education and learning to come on side. And if they don't, there can be consequences for those violations. So it's fundamentally much different. It is stronger, it is clear, it is consistent, and I think it's going to make a difference in changing the behavior and culture within our schools.
Next question. You briefly mentioned something about that educators will now note the students' distraction level and add it to the report card. How are they going to determine the distraction level, and will there be any consequences for the kids aside from sending into the office?
Well, first of all, what we think is important is that we help create transparency for parents to help measure their kids' success around keeping themselves focused on the curriculum, on this teacher, on the whiteboard. I mean, these are really important concepts. So teachers sometimes already include comments like, your child is on their phone all the time. I want to standardize that. I think parents should know and be able to measure success and hopefully improvements in how we change the culture of education and enforcement with the additional resources, the $17 million we're announcing today. So that's really the reason why we think it's important to do it, to put parents in the driver's seat. We're going to be sending a letter tomorrow to parents that's going to outline those aspirations, those expectations of all of us. We're going to be translating it into multi-languages, a recommendation of our caucus colleagues, that we reach parents where they're at. We're investing $1 million through School Mental Health Ontario to come up with really effective, dynamic engagement sessions with parents about how to empower them to have those difficult conversations. We are literally doing an all the above. We are throwing everything at this to change the culture positively in schools, where we restore focus and academic discipline and safety and common sense back into our schools, and I think parents welcome this change today.
Hi, Minister. Beatrice Faisman, CP24. When you talk about measuring success, how do you do that? How do you measure whether students are focusing more, being less distracted on their phones? What's the barometer that you use?
Yeah, I mean, I think fundamentally for many educators and for us in the ministry, it's about seeing improvement in academic achievement. This all comes down to strengthening the young person's ability to learn, to digest the knowledge, to apply it in their lives. And so we want to see higher EQAO rates in reading, writing, and math, higher graduation rates. And of course, we want to see better mental health data, where we're able to support our kids with a more holistic policy that enhances the education. It comes with enforcement, it comes with training, it comes with more mental health supports, leveraging our community. I think the mission is to persuade young people through hearts and minds that there's a better way to do this, that there is a stronger and better outcome associated with young people through an educational policy that is really reimagining what our school system's about. And for families across Ontario, they want to see our schools refocusing on academics. So we'll benchmark success according to the ability of kids to do well in literacy and in math, to graduate with higher rates of participation, and obviously more healthy lives.
What is it that the ministry is doing to, I guess, empower teachers? Because one teacher in a classroom of 30, especially high school students who've gotten pretty good at being sneaky with things like cheating, never mind using their cell phones under their desk. So what is it you're actually doing to empower teachers to have the tools to enforce this? And what are the consequences?
So there are progressive discipline policies listed in this. It can include up to suspension if there is repeat violations. We will respect the professional judgment of teachers of when technology is appropriate and when it is not appropriate. And I will have the backs of teachers and principals and superintendents who enforce this policy. Every time I will support them. We need consistency. We need rigor in our schools, and we need to restore safety. Too many kids can't focus because of the distractions in schools. We need schools to go back to the basics. And I think families agree. Teachers have been asking for enforcement policies and teeth. And that's what they're getting today, a commitment by the government from the highest levels that we will support them, we will train them, we will give them more resources and more personnel, particularly leveraging community-based mental health and addiction services. So we treat these kids with a sense of compassion, particularly on the vaping, and we fundamentally change the culture for the better in our schools. Thank you.
Hi, Afia Boss, City News. What about from some of the associations that were maybe hoping for some more consultation regarding this new approach that the province is taking?
You know, for the last 2 years, Parliamentary Assistant Patrice Barnes, we worked together and started, and now with Natalie Pierre, Billy Payne, we've continued this for 2 years of consultation with parents and students and health experts, the Chief Medical Officer of Health, and Sick Kids, and CAMH, student trustees in different regions from Thunder Bay all the way to Windsor-Essex. I've met them all. We've been listening attentively, and the problem is clear. We need to do something about it. We have a generational imperative to act. And if we don't get this right, you know, young people will be dramatically worse off. There is a consequence to inaction. And so we are bringing speed and urgency to this issue that I think families and health experts agree we must act. So we're doing it together. Now we're also launching a technical working group with our staff, with our health experts, with parents and students, bringing them all together to help implement this and get it right. But our bottom line is we need to restore academic focus and safety and common sense back in schools. We cannot do that until we rid our schools of the distractions of cell phones and the proliferation of vaping. This is more about academics, more about the mental health of children beyond even the academic issues. And so we're going to work together in a Team Ontario approach to get this right and see change in our schools starting September.
And I think one of the questions that continues to kind of go around is regarding, again, enforcement. And of course, these teens and tweens have found ways to maneuver their cell phone use. What about when they're on their laptops? How do teachers then enforce it on that way? They're going to be maybe going on socials and using it on their laptops. How then does a teacher enforce that? Where do they then draw the line? It's
an important question. So this policy applies to all technology. We're emphasizing cell phones because that is the elephant in the room. But teachers and this policy have the ability to permit or deny technology. There will be times, and folks, there are times when technology actually is necessary to learn. We need to respect the judgment of the teacher when that is the case. But if it is not the case, and the teacher has said once and twice and 3 times to put your phones away, and the student is not listening, we are empowering the teacher to take the cell phone for kids grades 7 and up, turn it off, bring it to the front of the class, leave it there. The child will learn for that session, focus on the teacher. At the end of the class, they can return their phone and use it as they please until they get back into the next class. This is about restoring focus during the instructional time. Outside of that, during lunch or recess or spares, we're going to try to treat kids with a sense of personal responsibility. We want to teach them the right policies, the right practices on how to responsibly use phones. But in class, during instructional time, we have a policy out of sight, out of mind, and we will support our teachers, our principals, and our school boards to implement this dispassionately across the board every time. We need to change the culture in schools, and I believe this policy will do that.
Peter Edwards, Toronto Star.
Hi, Peter.
Do you anticipate much of a tweaking process for kids with maybe a special custody situation or a health issue?
Yes. Yeah, it's an important point. So this policy will allow cell phone usage for children with special education needs, as it did in 2019. It will allow with kids with exceptional mental health challenges or who have physical health challenges. For example, if they're regulating their insulin and they're diabetic, we will still, of course, permit technology, including cell phones. So there's, of course, a reasonableness to this based on the health of the child. But for the overwhelming majority of kids where those exceptions do not apply, our policy, in a sentence, cell phones are out of sight, out of mind. Vaping is to be off school properties with severe consequences, which will include a call to the parent, the confiscation of the device, and of course, public health agencies stand ready to support education and enforcement too. We will work with everyone involved to fundamentally change the way our kids live their lives, to restore some humanity back in our schools where kids can work together and think together and communicate to each other and be emotionally intelligent. That's what we're trying to achieve here. It is a societal change, and it's going to take time. It's going to take collaboration. It's going to require all of us working together in the interests of children. But I do believe, we believe, as leaders in Ontario, health and government and education, that if we get this right, we will have a generational benefit for young people. And I think we need to act quickly and decisively, which is why this policy is being announced today to be implemented this September.
Would be expected to make a case to the school if there is some particular situation for their kid?
There is an exception policy built in for special education, for example, and school boards have already been allowing that since 2019. So this should be a fairly easy continuation of what exists in Ontario, because the province in 2019 set out minimum standards for usage, which include special ed, mental health, and physical health, for example, like the regulation of insulin is often an example with children with diabetes. So those exceptions are built in. That sense of reasonableness and compassion is going to continue to be there. But for the overwhelming majority of kids, cell phones are out of sight and out of mind.
That concludes today's press conference. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate this.